Any plans? Catching up on work. I have a lot of tasks that I agreed to a long time ago that I haven't had a chance to get to. So Thanksgiving is probably when I'll get to those things. Yeah, but besides that, just plans with family, just as usual. My uncle is a professional chef, and so Thanksgiving is always fun. Just to see what he's going to come up with. So, and his son is going to be cooking something too. So his son is really getting into baking, and so he's going to be baking our dessert. And so we're really excited for that. Yeah, it's always a lot of fun. How about you guys? Any plans? Nice. Yeah, Vegas is always fun. Yeah, I don't know if it's a Vietnamese thing, but my aunt loves to gamble, so she always takes any opportunity to go to Vegas or Pachanga or Tipala, and she loves the poker tables. Yeah. You always lose money, but it's fun. You don't go there to win money. You go there just to have fun. The important thing is to be responsible with it. Nice. That's a good find. Yeah, slots are fun. There's no pressure of any strategy. Just go for it. Ooh, that took a sour turn. I hope he's okay. All right, it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Doing good. How are you doing, Professor?
Good. Thanks for asking. It's our last meeting before Thanksgiving. So after this, we won't see each other for 10 days. And so I know, the university, thinks the break is for, catching up with family, resting, and, having a good time. But, because it takes place so late in the semester, I think we all know that, Thanksgiving is kind of a time to catch up on work. But I hope that you guys do get a chance to at least rest a little bit and and recharge, because it's I know it's been a really trying time for all of us. So take care of yourselves a little bit this weekend. Okay. All right. So before we get there, we have another set of lecture notes today, and so we're starting something new. And so I would say this topic is maybe not the most traditional thing to cover in engineering ethics class, but I think it's really important. And so these what I call these set of lecture notes is I call them organizational ethics. And so it's this is the lecture where I kind of I think probably the only one you take here where it tells you kind of what to expect generally when you go to a company, how to act, how to have your how to have a good relationship with your management and your other coworkers. And so it's a lot of the soft skills that I think they don't tell you in school, which is a very clickbaity thing, I know. But I'm hoping that this you guys find this stuff interesting and you find it useful, especially since I know a lot of you are seniors, and you're gonna be looking to find work and work for a company. And so this will tell you what to look out for in certain companies, what to look out for certain management, and how to protect yourselves in certain situations like this. Okay. All right, and so I think that's all my announcements. So are there any questions I can answer before we get started?
What did you call the name of this lecture? Organizational what?
Organizational ethics. And so it's lecture notes 12. That's on it should be on the site.
Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. And so organizational ethics. And so, let's start by just saying that, we know as engineers that, we're capable of creating really great and really innovative technology, right? And so that's kind of what we do as an engineer. But we can't just ignore the fact that most engineers, they perform their work within an organization or a company. And for a lot of you, you're going to be working for really, really big companies, right? And so nationwide, worldwide corporations, okay? And a lot of companies, engineering companies just by nature just have to be really large, just because a lot of the equipment that we work with, a lot of the projects that we work with really large budgets, it's really hard for small companies to handle all that stuff. And so just out of necessity, there are very large, very, very large engineering companies. And so, we can probably go around right now and just name, dozens of them. Things like Boeing, things like Raytheon, things like Amazon, Google, Edwards Life Science, Medtronic, there's tons of household names that, I'm sure a lot of you would love to work for. Johnson & Johnson, absolutely. Yep, definitely. And so, as part of working for a company, there's, you're going to interact with and you're going to meet a lot of different people, right? And a lot of people that aren't going to have the same kind of training as you, okay? And so learning how to, or knowing how to conduct yourself and how to work with other people like this is really an essential skill that all engineers should know. Okay. Because you'll probably find yourself interacting with financial people, with business people, with with the technician staff, right? And so there's all different kinds of people that you're going to meet at these companies, and you're going to have to work together with all of them. Okay. In particular, for this lecture notes, I want to talk a lot about the relationship between engineering and management. Okay. Okay. Because those are the people you'll probably interact with the most on a regular basis. And so, management takes a lot of different forms in a company, but no matter what company that you work for, you're going to have someone that you're going to ultimately be reporting to, and they're the ones that are going to kind of give you directions on what you need to do. Okay. And so the relationship that you have, with your manager is something that's critical, and not only for your professional success, but also just for your own personal happiness and your satisfaction with your work too. Because it does, and for a lot of people, it doesn't really matter what kinds of projects that they work on, how cool it is or how satisfying it is. If you don't have a good relationship with your management, then it can really, turn a good situation into something really sour. Okay. And so, we're going to talk about kind of the ins and outs of that today, what management is usually looking for, what engineers are typically looking for, and how you can kind of walk the tightrope between them. Okay. All right. And so let's start with the story. And so, I promised you a lot of story time in ethics, and here's another one. Okay. And so in the 70s, there was this engineer, his name was Paul Morenz. Okay. I've never met the man, and I actually don't know what he looks like, but we can make a simple cartoon of him. Okay, so let's say here's Paul Morenz. Oh, are we going to be going to R&D management? Not specifically, but we'll be talking about kind of management just in general. And a lot of the concepts that we'll go over can definitely be applied to R&D management. Yeah, I did work in an R&D department, for a bit when I was in college. And so if you do want to learn more about that, we can maybe talk offline about that. Yeah. Okay. And so Paul Morenz, he was a mechanical engineer, and he worked for a company called Martin Marietta. Okay. And Martin Marietta maybe is a company you haven't heard for before, but they were a key contractor for NASA. Okay. Okay. And in particular, they were one of the suppliers for some of the materials that NASA used on some of their spaceships. Okay. And so they basically manufactured or produced the materials and then sold them to NASA. Okay. And so the unfortunate story for Paul is that he was let go by Martin Marietta on July 25th, 1975. Okay, and so he lost a job, and so he's no longer happy, and so now he's a sad guy. Okay. All right, so that begs the question. So why did Paul lose his job with Martin Marietta? And so the reason he was let go was that he was not happy with how Martin Marietta was engaging with their business with NASA. Okay, and so what he believed was that Martin Marietta was being dishonest about the quality of the materials that they were selling to NASA. Okay, and so they thought Martin Marietta was being a little bit stretching the truth a little bit about how high quality their products were at the price that they were selling to NASA. Okay. And so, he spoke out about it. And so he talked to management about it. And then, he just wasn't really good with the work. Okay. And so for that, he was let go. Right. And when he was let go, he was, when he was having a conversation with his manager about why he was being let go, Mr. Morenz was told that he should learn how to play ball with management. Okay. And that's kind of the exact words that he was told. And so, Mr. Morenz here thought that was a very, not a justifiable way to let someone go. And so he took this case to court. And so, this case kind of dragged on in court for a long time, 17 years, in fact. But in 1992, Mr. Morenz was awarded a win in his lawsuit. And so he was deemed by the Colorado Supreme Court that he was unfairly terminated for his actions. And then he was paid reparations for his, for that misconduct. 17 years later. So, I can't even imagine waiting that long for, for restitution. Okay. And so after he won the court case, then he was a happy person. Okay. Because I'm sure he won a lot of money, but I didn't look into how much he won from the lawsuit, but I'm sure it was just as well served for him as well. Okay, and so that was a short story, and so it wasn't a very long one, but the reason I told this is that it's just to illustrate the fact that it's not uncommon for engineers and management to kind of not really see each other eye to eye. Okay, and so typically speaking, an engineer is going to be more likely to care about, the quality of the product and his professional codes of ethics, right? And so they think that they should be honest, with their products and honest with the things that they're selling. Okay. Whereas management is going to be generally more concerned with the success of the company. Okay. And sometimes these two things align, right? And so typically, if you sell good products, you're gonna do well as a company. But sometimes they can put you at odds, okay? And so there's gonna be situations like this that probably are going to occur in your professional life. And so we're going to take a careful look at that today, and probably the first day after the break, about how you can navigate these situations to avoid trouble. Yeah. Question: so would this be considered a whistleblower case? So usually a whistleblower, they usually go to the public, or they go to some official government agency to report some kind of misconduct. And so I'm not aware that Mr. Morenz here actually did that. I think he was just kind of just unhappy with how they were handling business. And so I know he filed a lawsuit, but I don't think he filed an official report, and like he definitely didn't go to the media about it either. And so I don't know if this is formally considered a whistleblower case. But it has a lot of the same undertones. And so, basically one of the employees thought that the company was being dishonest, and then he spoke out about it. But I think Mr. Morenz here was more concerned about his employment, more so than, stopping the company from doing anything wrong. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and summarize that. And so, let's have engineers and management. And so generally speaking, And so generally speaking, when you go work out in a company, right, you as an engineer, you're going to be more concerned about the quality of the work, right? And so you want to put out good quality work that makes you proud to be an engineer, okay? Whereas management, management is going to be more concerned with the success of the company. Okay. And so, a lot of times this can be, this can cause some conflict. Okay. But before we go any further, before we can dissect this relationship any further, I want to caution, I want to, throw a word of caution. And so the point I'm trying to make with this section is not to say that engineers and management will never see eye to eye. Okay. And so there shouldn't be a contentious relationship. Okay. Okay. And so this is not going to be like an us versus them kind of thing. Okay. And so, we're engineers are not going to be the saints and the heroes of the story, and management are the bad guys. Okay. That's not the case at all. And, if anything, it's both sides can be equally bad. Okay. And so, what my point with this section is that, I just want to highlight to you guys that there are going to be people in your company that don't have the same kind of priorities as you do in your work. Okay. And not to say that those priorities are wrong, because usually everyone is interested in having the company succeed. Okay. It's just that everyone has kind of different opinions about how to achieve that and how the company should go about that. Okay. And so the point is not to make it so that you always win. Okay. So because the engineers aren't always right. The idea is to take these mindsets of different people, take the different skill sets, and work together with them in order to make it something successful at the end. Okay. Okay. Because I'll tell you, in a lot of cases, that if it was up to the engineers to make all the decisions, then a lot of companies would have just been driven straight into the ground. Okay. And so you need those business people, you need management to to kind of keep everything organized and to make sure the projects are successful. And so a lot of times it's in your best interest as the engineer to work together with management. Okay. And so having a good relationship like that is really important. Okay. Okay, and so let's talk about let's talk a bit more about why there's often seen a lot of conflict between engineers and management. Okay, and part of the reason is that our professional training is just very different by nature. Okay? Okay. And so, you guys are in school, you're going to be in school for 4, 5, 6 years, learning really technical stuff, right? And, like we've said before, that most people are not going to, go through all that technical, technical training, right? And so we think of problems in a certain way. We use certain terminology. We use certain language to describe things that, other people don't use at all. Okay. I'll give you a quick example from my own personal life. And so, I didn't realize until fairly recently that my fiance thinks that I talk so much like an engineer. Like it's so obvious that I'm an engineer. And like I thought she was crazy like that. I'm like, I just talk normal. I talk like a normal person. But then we were in a taxi, when I went to Columbus with her, just last month. And then we were just talking, and then the taxi driver just said, "Sir, are you? I have to ask, are you an engineer?" And I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" And he said, "You talk like an engineer." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" Like, I still don't even know what that means, but apparently, we talk in a certain way that's very obvious to people. And so, I think, I think just because for me, I'm surrounded by engineers all the time. I talk to you guys most of the time, and so it doesn't make any sense to me. But just kind of be aware of that as well. Yeah. And so I bring that up because the thing that's really challenging between engineers and management a lot is communication. Okay? Okay. And so and so a lot of times engineers and management can be talking about very basically the same thing, but just the way that they describe it and the way they communicate it can be so different that they just might not even know what's going on. Okay. And so in particular, if let's say that you have to talk about a very technical issue with your management. Okay. So you have maybe something is technically wrong with a certain component. Maybe it's malfunctioning, or maybe it's not performing up to code. Okay. And if you have to describe this concept to management, you can't really use all the technical terms that we usually do. Okay. And so you have to explain it in kind of more everyday language. Okay. And so in the notes here I have that engineers often have to simplify their language. Okay. And so I'm very on purpose, I'm not saying that you have to dumb it down. Okay. So it's not like that at all. It's just that you have to use, you have to describe it in a way that an engineer who doesn't have the same training has to understand. Okay. And that can be really challenging because if you describe it in a certain way, sometimes it can be hard to communicate the severity of a certain issue. And so if you try to explain something and then management might think like, oh, that doesn't sound like that big an issue, let's continue on, that can be really frustrating. And I think that can build a lot of animosity. Okay? And so you have to think really carefully about how you communicate things with people, and to when things are urgent and when things are have certain level of severity, make sure that gets across when you're describing things to people. Okay. All right. And so an example for this is that if you've ever had a younger sibling or a younger cousin or something, and you try to teach them an important habit, like the reason why you should wash your hands before you eat, or the reason you should brush your teeth every day, right? And for them, they don't really understand why it's important. Then you'll probably understand why. Okay. And so it's kind of like that. All right. Any questions on this so far? Okay. All right. And so another reason there can be conflicts is that even though both engineers and management are interested in the financial success of the company. Okay. Okay. Even though both are interested in this, because if the company does well, then you get paid really well too. Okay. In addition to that, engineers typically feel additional responsibility regarding their profession and their own professional codes of ethics. Okay. Right. And so as an example, if a product that you're working on is suspected of being unsafe or being faulty, okay, then this issue usually takes top priority for the engineer. Okay? And so the engineer typically wants to fix this as soon as possible. Just for, if anything, just for professional pride, just to say that, you put out a good product out there. So, when you go and meet your other engineering friends, you can say that you're part of that. Okay. But if management sees an issue like this, they're more likely to treat safety issues or quality issues as kind of just another issue. Okay. Okay. Because usually they're juggling a lot of other things as well. Okay. And so, safety and quality, even though that stuff is typically important for a lot of managers as well, but it may not, reach the same level of importance as an engineer would do. Okay. Okay. And so it's important to make that distinction because, even though an engineer, like, yes, they have some level of, responsibility towards the company, but they also have responsibility towards their profession. Whereas management, they typically have much more responsibility just to the company. Okay. And so that's important to kind of take into account. Okay. Okay. All right. And so, in particular for large companies, in large companies, they like to promote this idea of called functional rationality. Okay. Which basically means that the company should pursue its goals in a very pragmatic and in a very practical manner. Okay. Okay. Right. And so this kind of mindset usually is not conducive to respecting morals or professional commitments. Okay. And so they're not going to be overly concerned with that. Okay. And so you can kind of try to put yourself in a situation. So we've talked about situations like this, like the Pinto, and probably with other products too, if you guys are already studying some of your case studies. Okay. But imagine that the product that you're working on, has a flaw in its design that you want to address. Okay. But in order for you to address this concern, this would push back the release of the product, by at least a couple of weeks. Okay. So it would take a little bit of time to work it out. Okay. And so when you're in a situation like this, you have to think about, how are you going to present this issue to management and frame it in a way that would resonate with them to allow you to push back the release. Okay. Because a lot of times management would be like, we don't want to push back the release. We've already kind of pushed this back before. Why should I let you push it back? Okay. And so you should think about ways that you can, communicate this that will resonate with them, that will convince them. Okay. And so you can talk about things about how, like, yes, we can put out this product right now, but if customers start using it and it starts acting up, that's going to hurt our company's reputation in the long run. Right. And so that's going to affect the sales of our future products, because then we'll start to get a reputation of, having faulty or low quality products. products. Okay. Or you can, if you're that worried about the safety, then you could say that, if we put out this product right now and people hurt themselves, people might start to sue us into oblivion. So that's obviously going to hurt our bottom line as well. Okay. And so when you start thinking about things in terms of that, and kind of knowing what management is concerned about, you can get them to kind of work together with you on issues a little bit better. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. And so let's talk about the next topic, which is company culture. Okay. So every company or every organization has a culture associated with them. Okay. Okay. And so I'm sure it's something that you're all aware of. I'm sure it's something that you talk about, with your friends a lot. Okay. But culture is usually defined as like a general mindset and general viewpoints adopted by the employees when carrying out their jobs. Okay. And so it affects, what decisions people make, and how they view and react to certain events. Okay. Okay. All right. And so if you have a company that values quality and integrity, okay, and so this will be reflected in the work that their employees do. Okay. Whereas a company that values more productivity and success, you'll see that reflected in its employees as well. Okay. All right. And so typically, company culture, of course, a lot of it depends on how the workers and stuff interact. But generally speaking, company culture is set from the top down. Okay. And so this usually means that the head of the company, the CEO, and are the high-ranking managers, and if you have a board of trustees or something like that, they're going to be the ones that set the culture for the company. Okay. Okay. Right. And so, before you start to work at a company, it's really important to learn and understand what the culture is like. Okay. And so this is a great interview question, by the way. And so, I know a lot of you will probably be interviewing for jobs soon. And after every interview, they always ask you, do you have any questions for us, about the company? Ask them about their culture. Like that's super important for you to learn about, right? Like, yes, salary is, of course, that's probably the most important thing. But the culture is what you're going to be interacting with on a day-to-day basis, right? It's what what your management is going to be. It's the mindset they're going to have. A lot of the employees that have been there for a long time, that's what they're going to be like as well. And so really ask about it, and really ask yourself, and based on what they say, ask yourself if that's something that you feel like you could fit in and be happy with for a long time. Okay. And and try to read between the lines of what they say, right? And so a lot of these recruiters and a lot of these HR people, they're used to people asking questions about this, and so they'll talk about things like, oh, like, yeah, the company's great, everyone works really hard, we think of this as like a family, right? So that's usually a red flag, for a lot of cases. And so if a company describes itself as a family, what they really mean is that they're going to expect you to do a lot of extra unpaid overtime, right? All for kind of the collective good of the family, and of taking care of the workers, right? Which sounds great, right? Because usually, when you do that for your family, like you take care of a loved one, you take care of a sibling, there's that faith that person is going to take care of you back, right? When you're in trouble. But I'll tell you right now, most companies don't give a shit about their employees, okay? And so they're going to expect you to put in a lot of work, but when you need help, they're going to be like, oops, sorry, don't know money for that. So that's something to be aware of. Okay. Not to say that those places aren't great places to work. It's just just kind of be careful. Just kind of be careful about those things, because I know I personally know a lot of people that have been taken advantage of in those kinds of situations. So yeah, definitely be careful. Okay. Any questions on this so far? Okay. All right, and so let's talk about generally what kinds of company cultures there are there out there for engineering companies in particular. Okay, and so I'm going to give three here, and these are three very very general categories. But of course, there's all kinds of in betweens and stuff that maybe don't fit into these ones. But I think these three are kind of a good way to start you to at least categorize the companies that you're going to be interviewed for. Okay. All right, number one. So number one is what I call an engineering-oriented company. Okay. And so these are usually companies where the head of the company, a lot of the high-level management, they have a very strong engineering background. And so they came up as an engineer, and they either founded the company or they inherited the company, and engineering is their kind of a mindset. Okay. And so in these companies, quality and safety take precedence over everything. Okay. Okay. Right. And so these companies are generally more concerned with their reputation as a company and with the quality of their products. Maybe sometimes even to the detriment of their financials. Okay. Okay. And so, like I said, for these companies, you'll see a lot of people with engineering backgrounds, either at the very top of management, or in very high level positions as well. Okay. And so engineers at these companies, when they describe their relationship with management, they usually describe a very, very good relationship. Okay. And so, it's a very good relationship because, both engineering and both management, they really, try really hard and in good faith to try to find a consensus on certain decisions. Okay. And so there's very rare cases where, one person will go over the head of someone else, or one person will do something that's really out of line. And so it's a really collaborative, usually kind of environment. Okay. Okay. All right, number two. And so number two is what I like to call customer-oriented companies. Okay. And so in these companies, they're often seen as similar to engineering-oriented companies, but there's a little bit more separation between the engineers and management. Okay. Okay. And so what I mean by that is that there's a little bit more division of labor. Okay. And so when there's a concern about quality or safety, then management kind of they kind of stay out of that, and they kind of stay out of that issue, and they leave it up to the engineers. Okay. Okay. Whereas concerns about cost, things about business timing, those are handled kind of solely by management. Okay. And so there's kind of this distinct separation between them. Okay. And so there's less, I would say, less collaboration, but more, you kind of leave certain issues to the experts. Okay. All right. And so in these situations, quality sometimes is sacrificed, in order to get the product to market. Okay. Just because these, not everyone is helping to make all the decisions. Okay. But this can often lead to higher financial success. Okay. And when you have higher financial success, oftentimes those profits are passed on to the employees. Okay. And so what this means is that, pay is going to be a little bit better. Okay. All right. And so those are the first two, types of culture. Okay. Any questions on this so far? Okay. All right. So let's talk about the third one. Okay. And so if you kind of notice, we're kind of on a little bit of a slide. Okay. And so on the one end of the spectrum, you have engineering-oriented companies. Customer-oriented companies are kind of in the middle of that spectrum. And then we're going to talk about the last one here, number 3. All right, so number 3, we have what's called finance-oriented companies. Okay. And so in finance-oriented companies, these companies are the ones that value profit and market success above all else. Okay. Okay. And so in these companies, management holds a lot of power, and they're less inclined to try to reach agreements with engineering. Okay. Okay. And sometimes in very extreme unfortunate cases, sometimes engineers can be seen as like the staff. Okay. And so not as really as equal contributors as management. Okay. And so that's kind of in the worst case. Okay? But because these companies are so focused on profit and market success, that means financially, they're usually really well off. Okay. And so out of the 3 cultures that we talked about, these ones are going to pay the best. Okay. And just speaking kind of anecdotally, or I should say, speaking from the anecdotes of some of my friends, a lot of times you work at a company like this, it's just so big. And the company itself is extremely successful, but you can kind of just feel a little bit lost. You feel like there's a cog in the system. Okay. They pay you well, which is really great, but I know maybe a lot of people that I know don't have as much satisfaction from their work. Yeah, I'm not going to drop any names, but I'm sure a lot of you can kind of read between the lines about what kinds of companies are these ones. Yeah. And I will say that it's not a bad thing to work with these companies. I think it's easier for me to kind of talk about it here, as someone in education. But the pay is not trivial, right? And so a lot of times the pay is something that's really important for a lot of people. And there's no judgment in that at all, because people have bills to pay, they have loved ones they have to support, and so you work for a really big company that makes a lot of money. You make a lot of money, and that's fine. Okay, it's all about how you want to kind of live your life, right? Because I think it's easy for me. It's easier for people to say like, oh yeah, you should work at a company that's really fulfilling, where you feel very valued at your job, and you're respected and all that stuff. Okay. But I know a lot of people who make their lives fulfilling outside of work as well. So they make their lives fulfilling in their hobbies, and spending time with their loved ones, and their work they just go to work just to get the paycheck so they can maintain their life outside of work. Okay, and that's totally fine too. So there's no wrong way to go about life. Okay, and so no matter what kind of company you work for, as long as you're happy just to to some degree, then that's what's important. Yeah. Question. So is it difficult to have multiple cultures at once because it can interfere with one another? Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, like, especially in bigger companies, maybe the big company itself might have a certain culture, but maybe your particular team, your particular department, they might have a different culture as well, and that's very common too. And I would say that's very common even in the educational realm as well, right? And so I would say all the departments here at Cal State Fullerton have their own culture, which I think is very different from the culture that President Virgie might want to have. But I would say it's not that difficult. I mean, I'd say sometimes it might be difficult if you end up working with people outside your department a lot. But if you're mostly working kind of within your department, you don't really notice it all that much. Yeah. All right. I bring these three cultures up, as kind of broad categories, but it's important for you guys to think about, what kind of culture do you want to work for, right? If you really want to work for an engineering-oriented company, maybe sacrifice and pay a little bit, or if you want to work for a really big company where you're going to get paid really well. Okay, that's important to know, and it's important to really define for yourselves, especially as you go out to find work right now. Okay, and and don't be afraid to change your opinion too. I know a lot of people, and again, speaking from personal experience from friends, they graduate from college thinking that this is the kind of company that they want to work for. But as they grow and as they mature, and as other things happen in their lives, then their priorities shift, and that's okay too. And it's fine to experience one thing, maybe like it for a little bit, and then hop on to something else. Okay, and so that's don't be afraid to do that as well. Okay. Any more questions on company culture? Can a company be customer oriented but pays due to upper people not wanting to pay employees? Yes. In fact, that's a very big problem right now. Across many different sectors. I don't want to say anything more because we're kind of having a very similar situation right now in the Cal States, but I think if I say any more, I might get in trouble. So maybe if you get me drunk one day, then we can talk about it a bit more. But yeah, it is a big problem. Yes. Okay. Right. We're meeting up for break. I'm not going to Vegas though. maybe in Christmas. Okay. All right. And so that's company culture. Okay. And so let's talk about how to deal with certain kinds of culture. Okay. Or I guess I should say how do you act as an engineer within certain cultures in order to make sure that you're respecting your own morals, your own integrities, your own professional code of ethics, while also helping the company succeed as well. Okay. Okay, and the important thing is to protect yourself as well. Okay, and so a lot of these advices that we'll talk about now are they're good to know in general, just to make sure you're acting according to your code of ethics, but also it's good just to know how to protect yourself so you don't get yourself in trouble. Okay, and I'll admit that I'm one that needs to follow some of this advice as well, especially recently. Okay, number one. All right, number one, don't be afraid to report bad news. Okay. So nobody likes to go to their manager and say that, the thing is behind schedule, or, we need to work on this more, or it's not working out the way that we thought. Okay. No one wants to do that. No one likes to do that, but you have to do that. Okay. So you can't be dishonest with how things are going, and, you can't sweep issues under the rug. Okay. And so you have to report those things. Okay. And if there's a particular issue that you have with, how you're being treated at the company, then often a lot of companies will have formal channels for you to report to. Okay. Okay. And so, you'll have things like ethics officers, where, maybe you're seeing something troubling, and, maybe if it's hard for you to report it to your management, you can report it to the ethics officers, and they can, they can help you navigate through it. Okay. And so this could be helpful because, a lot of times, depending on the relationship you have with your manager, maybe sometimes you just kind of can't do that. Okay. And so it can be useful to, feel like, and so it's can be useful to feel like that there are other channels for you to lodge concerns, to lodge complaints, that it's not your immediate manager. Okay. But don't hold bad news in. Okay. Because if something goes wrong and you don't tell anybody, then ultimately you're going to be held responsible. Okay. And so if you feel like you can't, the first person you should talk to is always your manager. But if you can't talk to your manager for whatever reason, or if you think, something bad's going to happen, then, try some other channel within the company. Because, if you don't say anything, then, ultimately you're going to take the fall for it. Okay. Okay. Number two. Okay. Number two is to adopt a stance of what I call critical loyalty to a company. Okay. Okay. And so, every company nowadays is going to want you to buy into, what they're selling, right? And so they want you to not only work there, but they also want you to kind of be an ambassador for that company too, right? And so, you work for Google, you have to rep Google products. You work for Apple, you have to rep Apple products. Okay. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If you like Apple stuff, like Google stuff, you should show it off. Okay. And so it's good to do that stuff, and it's good to believe in the company, and it's good to want it to succeed. Okay. Because generally that means it's a good thing for you. Okay. But with that in mind, even the best companies out there can engage in unethical practices. And if they're engaging in activities that you don't agree with, that you think goes against your ethics, then don't engage with them. Okay. And so don't, in other words, don't succumb to peer pressure. Okay. And so, it's fine to be passionate about your work. It's fine to, like your company, but, you have to draw the line somewhere, and you have to always kind of remember what your own personal ethics are. Okay. And make sure to always follow those. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. Number three. Number three is when you are making criticisms or you are making suggestions, focus on the issues rather than the personalities. Okay. This one's really important, and I think this is especially important in today's climate, where people get called all kinds of things on social media. Okay. And so once you start attacking people's personality, or you start attacking someone's person, that's never a productive way to go about things. Okay, and so when you start to attack people, right, then people just naturally they're going to get defensive and they're going to get emotional, and then which of course feels really bad because then they're probably going to start attacking you as well. But it's also not productive, and it's not it doesn't help resolve anything. Okay. What I always like to think about is, if someone is doing something that you want them to correct, or you want them to change, or if they're doing something that upsets you, focus on just the action itself. And so, if you, instead of saying, you're such a whatever, right? Don't do that, because then that attacks their whole personality, right? Instead, say something like, I don't like how you do this, right? Like, I don't like how you talk to that person. Like, I don't like how you how you treat people, right? That's a lot better than saying you're such an asshole, right? No one likes to be called that. And so you have to talk about the action that they're doing that makes you unhappy, and then that's how you can get people to change. And so not to no personal attacks on stuff. Okay, that's really important. I think that's really important nowadays. Just as kind of a general word of advice. And you'll learn too that if you to really get what you want, like that's something that you always have to do, right? It's really easy to get emotional with certain people, especially someone that you're really upset with, and to attack their person. But if you really want something to change, or you really want something to be better, you have to kind of stay away from attacking their person. Okay. And so this is a great advice for how to get things done with management. Okay. All right, number 4. Number 4 is to keep a written record of all suggestions or criticisms that you make with dates. Okay, keep everything in writing. Okay, because you need a paper trail sometimes in order to prove that that you did bring certain issues up, or that this was a concern that you talked with someone. Okay, and so a tactic that people will use in order to to kind of bully you is they say, oh, let's talk about this on the phone, or oh, let's talk about this in person. Okay, and the reason, and part of the reason they do that is so that there's no record of things being said there. Okay, and so make sure that you get things down in writing as much as you can. So write it in emails, take notes on things. Okay, make sure there's a record of what you said. Make sure that you stay professional and respectful this whole time, because that can only help you in the end. Okay, because otherwise, if there's no written record for anything, that it's very hard for you to prove anything, because it's always going to be your word against somebody else's. Okay. All right, number 5. And so whenever you do have complaints about your company, about the way things are being run, or if you have any kind of criticisms, try to keep them as confidential as you can. Okay. Okay. And that's just kind of a good advice to do. So it not only protects you, but it protects your company as well. And ideally, going back to point number 3, when you do have issues, like, you want the issues to be resolved. Right? You don't want there to be any kind of bad blood between people. Okay, and so try to keep things confidential if you can. All right, number 6. Number 6 is to ensure that there are provisions for a neutral outside party to get involved if necessary. Okay. And so, counter to point number 5 is that, if you feel like, things aren't going to be resolved, make sure you know like some outside sources that can help you. Okay. All right, question. So if it wouldn't work to go to HR, and is it true that HR is more for the company than it is for workers? I've heard a lot of anecdotal things about that. I can't, really comment on if that's true for every place. But I would say, just in a gesture of good faith, negotiating, I would try to go to HR first, for your companies, because if you because I think kind of the general attitude that's out there right now is kind of what you're sharing, is that HR is only there to benefit the company, and they're not there to look out for workers. And certainly I know that there's a lot of stories out there that's like that, but that's not everything that's told too. And so I think it makes for a better employee company relationship if you do try to go through their official channels first, and so you do try to talk to HR, to at least try to resolve the issue internally. And of course, if that's not working out, then you can go outside as well. But if you don't try to go to HR at all, then that can lead to some bad relationships in the future. Yeah. Mhm. All right. Number 7, and so number 7 is to be aware of all the protections that are being made for people that do lodge criticisms. Okay. Okay. Outside source would be a union. Yes, definitely. Yeah, the union is definitely a great resource to have as well. But yeah, only go to them if you need to. Okay. All right. And so number 7, this gets a little bit into whistleblowing, and so I think we'll get into whistleblowing probably after the break. But just be aware that there are protections for whistleblowers out there. And so if you are thinking of going outside with certain issues, then make sure you're aware of those protections. Okay. All right. And number 8, right, I can squeeze it here. Okay. Number 8 is to when you do have a dispute between yourself and management, try to handle them as quickly as possible. Okay. Because a lot of times, when a certain dispute is happening, the company or the management will try to drag it out as long as they can. Okay. But usually the longer a dispute drags on, the longer it kind of benefits the company. And so, if you can, even if you have to be kind of a pest about it, even if you kind of have to be annoying, try to resolve things, as soon as possible. Because otherwise it could, I think first of all, it could lead to a lot of animosity, between the employees and the employer, right? Because the employees are feeling like their concerns are not being addressed. But also it lets the company kind of take time to strategize on how to protect themselves too. So, they might hire lawyers or PR firms and things like that in order to, make sure things are okay. So, try to get things resolved as soon as possible. I think because I think you'll be much happier, sooner if that's the case. Okay. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. So hopefully, these 8 pieces of advice will help you. And so, I think you'll see very quickly that once you get out into the workplace, it's a very different environment than being in school. Okay. But hopefully, if you keep these 8 pieces of information in mind, you'll know how to conduct yourselves well and how to protect yourself when things aren't going well. Okay. All right. And so for the last 7 minutes of class today, I want to talk about kind of a division of labor. Okay. And so, I want to talk about functions of engineers and management and what kinds of decisions should be made by engineers and what kinds of decisions should be made by the manager. Okay. Okay. All right. And so with all this in mind, we've talked about, how engineers and management, approach their work differently. And so, it should be a fair question to ask is how exactly should the responsibilities be divided between engineers and management? Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and classify two types of decisions. So one type of decision will be called a proper engineering decision, okay, otherwise known as a PED. Okay. And so proper engineering decisions are either ones that, first of all, involve any kind of technical matters. Okay. Okay. And so if it's a matter that requires engineering expertise, and so maybe the design of the product has to be modified to reduce the mass by 20%, then that's obviously an engineering decision, right? So you shouldn't let your business school managers say, look at your rocket ship and say, yeah, let's take that component off. We don't need that because we need to cut the weight by 20%. Okay, an engineer should be the one to make that decision and to make that design. Okay. All right, number two, or B, I guess, another proper engineering decision is, one that falls within the ethical standards of engineering codes. Okay. And if it's an issue that has to do with your engineering codes, an engineer should make that decision. All right, and so let's contrast this with decisions that should be made by management. So we call these proper management decisions. Okay. And so proper management decisions are ones that involve the well-being of the organization. Okay. Okay. And so these are things like cost, scheduling, marketing, employee morale, etc. Okay. Okay. And B, a proper management decision should be one that does not force engineers to make unacceptable compromises, okay, with regards to their own standards. And so, of course, these two things were written by engineers. And so, the engineer, of course, the engineer should say that the management shouldn't override the engineer. But, a lot of times it's a bit more complicated than that. Okay. All right. So let's stop here for today. Okay. And so it's about 2:15. And so when we come back on after the break, we'll talk about how do you engage in disobedience with your company. Okay. And so we'll talk about whistleblowing. We'll talk about, what you're going to do if you want to strike, things like that. Okay. All right. So thank you everyone for coming today. I know it's the last session before the break. And so I know everyone's eager to get to Thanksgiving. And so, I really appreciate you guys coming out. And so have a great Thanksgiving break, everyone. I know it's probably going to be a busy break for everyone, but, please take some time to take care of yourself. Okay. It is a break. And so, you should rest up, regain your physical health, mental health, all that's really important. Okay. And I will see you guys after the break. Right.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Thanks. You too.
I just had a question, I guess, regarding homework 6.